Hey, welcome, everybody. Tonight, we are going to be doing a little review of a debate that I didn't watch. Yeah, that's how good I am. I don't even have to watch a debate to actually do a review on it because, I just didn't have time to watch it. I will eventually, I'm sure. I looked at parts of it just because I got a screen cap from it, so there's a little bit of stuff that I did listen to. But it was a debate between Sarah Michelle, and Adam Friended on basically, the way I understood it, secular morality versus Christian morality. Sarah was taking the position that secular morality is more superior. Adam, we don't know his positions because it's Adam. None of us usually understand his positions, but that's why we have him on here to actually help maybe elucidate his positions a little bit more because, well, it's Adam.
Oh my God.
I have to have that for you, man. See, I told you we're just internet buddies, man.
Sarah actually did a decent job of steel manning my position. So what you said is completely untrue. She knows
So she knew your argument better than you knew your argument. Is that what
well,
you're
she
saying?
knew my argument well enough to state it,
I
which
didn't. When I
I'm
went
not sure
there,
that's the case.
I actually thought you were a Christian. My whole way that I prepared my argument was assuming that I was debating a Christian. If I
no,
knew your
no.
position, I would have probably done a lot better. I was a little puzzled by it. It just doesn't seem to make any sense to me, and I think this is a good opportunity to try to understand better.
Well, maybe
Well,
we can
I
start from the beginning, Adam. Kind of tell us what the debate was over and what your actual position on it is. So we'll steelman you here.
well, the debate, I think we never really got past what defining Christian morality and secular morality so we could compare the two. Like we kind of got lost. And I feel like Sarah was uh, and a lot of people in the comments seem to think that she was kind of straw manning Christianity. I think a lot of the dissent came down to the fact that anti-theists typically want to say that Christianity is kind of this this morality from ancient times. They pull it out of the Bible and force Christians to take positions that they don't actually adhere to. So I was saying that we would really have to, in order to look at Christian morality, we would have to take 10 modern Christians off the streets and kind of gauge their positions. And we're really comparing that to secular morality.
So you don't think there's a baseline of what Christian morality? When you say Christian morality, do you don't think there's something that comes to most people's mind of what they think is a moral code based upon the Christian narrative, or more specifically, something along divine command theory?
Well, I'm not really familiar with what would you call it? Command.
Divine
Divine
command
command
theory
theory.
is called ethical subjectivism. It's basically the position that God, whatever He says is moral, is moral, just because
Okay,
He
Yeah.
so
always says it.
that's
One
we.
thing.
Go ahead,
Sorry.
Sarah.
One thing that I always, when I talk to actual Christians about this topic, one thing that becomes always a problem for Christians is when I ask them whether God and the Bible is morally perfect, because that is a crux of Christianity. God is morally perfect. God, whatever God decides that is moral, is not up for question, because it's God cannot be questioned as a source of morality. He is perfect. So what I really didn't understand about your argument is that if you believe the Bible is up for questioning, for interpreting however we like, then the judges of morality is no longer God. The judge of morality is ourselves. And this is totally anti Christian.
Well, I believe the Christians use God as the enforcement mechanism. In the debate, we definitely seem to
Yeah, very
agree
good.
on the fact that there's a list of rules and that there's an enforcement mechanism. So
Yeah,
my argument would be that the list of rules is changing, but the enforcement mechanism, it has always been God. And from an evolutionary perspective, God is a better enforcement mechanism than reason or experience, because you and I both, neither one of us believe in God, but we understand the concept of God. And if you're, you know, passing off all of your enforcement and monitoring costs to this invisible being that's all seeing and all knowing and perfect, then you will have people monitoring themselves more closely. There's no kind of secular parallel to that. So I mean, just from a evolutionary perspective, that form of thinking is the most economical, and it seems obvious that evolution would seize on that.
Well, give me an example. Give me an example of a codified thing for Christian morality that you're referring to. Then, are you talking about like the Levitical code or something, or?
Well, obviously, Christianity, there's a hierarchy of rules, right? I would argue that the highest rule in Christianity is something about forgiveness, because the whole Jesus story revolves around forgiveness.
I thought it was love thy neighbor with all thy heart, or love thy God with all thy heart. There's a couple. The golden rule. There's a couple. It's the commandment above all. What is it? The number one commandment is to love thy neighbor like yourself, right, Sarah?
Well,
is that right?
we can.
I'm not the Bible person, remember?
Yeah, we can argue about this, but from a Christian perspective, I'm just saying what Christians.
No, the problem, Adam, is what I think you don't understand about Christianity. I am assuming you don't, based on what you're saying, is that the source of morality in Christianity is God. The source of morality.
But I'm not looking at it from a Christian perspective. I'm looking at it from a scientific perspective. I'm looking at it from an evolutionary perspective. Don't you think we could learn more from understanding it from an actual scientific perspective? Are you a pro-science or not?
But then it's not Christian, and that is the whole thing.
Which better illuminates the world? A Christian perspective or a scientific perspective?
The debate was, well, that is a fair comparison. That is not a fair comparison when we're talking about morality.
Which better illuminates reality, a Christian perspective or a scientific?
I don't think that was the debate, though, was it?
Sorry?
That wasn't really the debate. If you have a secular moral system or you have a Christian moral system, I thought the debate was which one was better, right?
Exactly. The debate was about morality. It was about which one is the best source of morality. Now, my argument, the best source of morality.
What is the best way to answer that question? The debate question.
Well, the debate question is to think about the source. What is the best source of morality? That's the whole thing about.
What is the best way to compare two moralities? What is the best way to compare two of anything? That's why I went to codification.
That's why I went to law, because I believe the best way to compare them is how they are codified in law.
What is the best? Is the scientific method the best?
I don't know why you're applying science to this. It's a philosophical question.
A philosophical question, exactly.
Yeah, and by the way, if it was super chat,
it's not. Does not science? Isn't there a philosophy of science?
Yeah, but philosophy of science tells you how science operates. That's what you're talking about. Is not a scientific question. Morality is not scientific. It's philosophical.
How do you know that?
Because it falls under philosophy. Odian $2 says Christian morality is based on a self-sacrificial love. Yeah,
we agreed. We agreed that that morality is a set of rules. Okay. So if we agree that morality is a set of rules and we are going to compare that set of rules, aren't we engaging in a scientific act? We're not engaging in a philosophical act.
First of all, you guys can't talk over each other, and you're so low still, Sarah, that people... What happened? You used to have a good mic. I don't know. Where's your good mic?
I'm not using my PC. I'm using my phone.
Okay. The camera's great, but the mic quality is lacking a little bit.
Sorry?
The camera is great, but the mic quality is lacking a little bit.
Yeah, I need to buy a freaking mic. Yeah. I'm getting paid next week.
Yay! At least somebody is. Awesome.
Yes, somebody is, exactly. Right?
She gets it. She gets it. There you go.
You will be, Steve.
Yeah.
Don't worry. You will be. Now, the thing about what I don't understand about this whole point about applying science here is because when we talk about morality, this whole thing about morality being a set of rules, that is a simplification of what morality is. Morality is a set, it's not exactly a set of rules, but axioms, maxims, oughts and ought nots that will determine what is right and what is wrong. And what I say is like a classification of values and archetypes between what is wicked and what is virtuous.
Yeah, but what makes it wicked or virtuous?
Well, that is the exactly thing. How
from
do we
a scientific perspective? From a scientific
Well,
perspective, from an
what I
evolutionary
said,
perspective, what makes it
yeah.
wicked or virtuous?
Adam, you're killing me here.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
open your mind,
what makes
Steve.
it,
What make can I address it,
what makes
Sarah?
it, well,
Yeah, go ahead.
that is what I say about being
What?
secular,
Yeah,
being
this is
best, because we can, what we determine what is virtue and what is wicked is our experience, our collective experience, and our collective knowledge. We learn more about reality, we learn more about the world, we learn more about each other, and then we perfect our morality. But if the source of our morality is God, that we assume to be perfect, and his codified morality, which is the Bible, we can no longer, or at least our margin, the this extent to which we can perfect it is much more limited, because whatever is unambiguous in the God, like the codified prescriptions of the Old Testament, we cannot change that, which is why I was so heavy on slavery, because the Bible is unambiguous on slavery, and we cannot change God's words on slavery. God sanctions it.
Yeah, I think you have a point there. Let's answer his question more directly, and we'll talk about the slavery thing, because I think that's a good example. Adam, what makes something moral or immoral is exactly what she said. These are things that are what you ought to do. These are basically right or wrongs, depending.
Why?
I was getting there.
Okay.
I mean, I'm in the middle of a sentence, and I'm hopefully finishing
sorry.
and explaining the answer to you. These are normative theories of ethics, right? So a normative theory of ethics is basically what you do given a certain situation, whether you appeal to consequences, whether you appeal to duty, as responsibility, which are deontological type approaches. But a normative thing is basically, I am tend to virtue ethics. So a virtue ethics would be, what is the highest value that you're putting forth, that you're ascribing to go for, your virtue that you're going for. That's what we find to be moral. If I say it is immoral to not be brave, okay? Because bravery is in between cowardice and recklessness, right? It's the golden mean between those two vices. That's a virtue between those two. That's what virtue ethics kind of does. Is what's the best between two vices? In this case, I want to be brave. I don't want to be a coward, but I don't want to be so brave that I'm reckless. That's how we determine what's moral in a virtue ethics point of view. There are other ways we can determine what's moral as well. That's not based on science. This is, again, based on philosophical considerations. Science doesn't tell us anything about what is right or wrong morals. That's why you need philosophy of science, like bioethics. Science doesn't care whether we do embryonic genetic edits with CRISPR. Science doesn't care one way or another. It's the philosophy of science that says, no, that's bad, because we shouldn't do that because of consequences, like appealing to consequences. That's another reason we determine something to be immoral, if it affects the germline. That's how we know what's right or wrong.
Can you answer my question? Why?
I could repeat it back to you in Spanish, maybe.
What? Why?
I don't. How does that not answer your question?
Why is bravery virtuous?
Because it's in between two vices. That's the virtue ethics.
Why?
So,
what in the material world does bravery affect?
That's not how virtue. You have to appeal to some kind of theory. The theory of morals that some people use, like I use, is the virtue ethics theory of morals. Why is because that one I happen to like. I think it works for me. Now you could appeal to different different moral theories, but we have to say, what is it that is right or wrong? I have to go by some yardstick by which I can measure that, and other people can use the same measurement. Sarah can look at it and go, yes, you know what? Being courageous is a virtue here, because you don't want to be a coward, and you don't want to be reckless because it's going to get you killed, and you don't want to run away from danger because then you lose the war. There's a medium that we have. There's a consequence to be had there as well, if you want to put it that way. Real quick, Michael M. Sarah Michel rules for 1,000 rubles. Yes, she does. We know. Don't stroke her ego any more than it is, man. She's already getting like this fame thing going to her head. You can just see it in her eyes. She started off with like 100 subs. Now she's like, yeah, she's gonna hit like 1,000, I think, coming up here. There's gonna be 10,000, 100,000. There's gonna be like, Steve who? We've seen it before. I get it.
So I have a very evolutionary way of looking at morality. Morality is a set of rules that binds a community into a group to compete against other groups. Now,
but I think you are forgetting a previous step in that. Like, that definition is useful, and I used it in the debate because
it's an empirical definition that we can test. We can test one morality against another morality.
Yeah,
scientifically, empirically.
But when you're talking about set of rules, you are talking already about codification. That's why I talk about codification.
What do you mean by codification?
well, a set of rules is something that we can look on, and we decide, and we can punish people when they don't follow those rules. So those rules
Punishing people is part of the rules. That's a aspect of the rules. The rule
That's
is
why
if somebody doesn't act brave, you punish them.
that is why you create rules.
You
Exactly.
admonish them from the group.
You can punish them for not being moral or for not being virtuous.
So if we're going to use this framework,
Adam, you got to stop interrupting, man.
Okay.
Let her at least finish a sentence.
She technically interrupted me while I was talking. So
before we get to that point, there is a whole other thing, which is how we come to our oughts and not nots. How we get to those maxims, that how we come to define that bravery is something desirable before we decide to make a rule that enforces bravery and punish the cowards. There is a step before that I think you are missing in your view of morality.
So how do we come to the rules?
Well, that is what I say, that we come to the rules by collective knowledge and experience, collective knowledge and collective wisdom.
Trial and error. A lot of it is.
Yeah, very much. Evolution works on trial and error.
Yeah.
But what is the ultimate goal? Like when we're doing trial and error, what we're looking for success, but what is that success?
Well, that is what the whole thing about objective morality is about, that Sam Harris especially speaks of, that the goal of morality would be the general well-being of your community.
So
it's called etymoia, the human flourishing.
So then we're going to agree then the goal is the most well-being for the most number of people. We're basically all going to be utilitarians.
That's.
So are we all going to be?
No, I'm not a utilitarianist, so I don't think it's for the goal of the most well-being. A virtue ethics person. I tend to virtue ethics.
But so evolution really, I think, from if you're looking at morality, the evolution of morality, like the purpose of morality, I really think you are going to become it's going to become a utilitarian type argument, because really groups are going to be the most stable in situations where the most well-being is being propagated to the widest number of people. Groups become unstable when elites basically feather their nest at the expense of everybody else, which is not a utilitarian argument, correct? Like if we developed a moral code that basically took everything from, subjugated 99% of the population, so 1% could be well-being off the charts, that doesn't seem like it would be a stable situation, correct?
Well, you're saying that if one specific group maintained morality for everybody, that wouldn't be a stable. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, so one group, we have two competing moralities. We have the morality with a rule set that is basically a small percentage of people subjugating the vast majority of people. Their well-being is off the charts. Most people's well-being is terrible. Okay, we see that in the world. That's North Korea. That's despotic regimes, right?
That was Christianity, for most of its history, yeah.
Okay. Who's interrupting who here, Steve? I just want to.
Yeah, okay, Sarah, he had a long pause, and I thought he was done too, but I guess he's going to call that interrupting.
I just need to interject that.
Yeah.
So, and then we have the second morality, which is the more utilitarian morality. It's a democratic republic, right? It's trying to get the most for the most number of people. It's basically utilitarianism, right? Which moral system is going to outcompete the other moral system? We can look at those moral systems. We can look at those set of rules. We have an empirical framework to test the two. We can actually test the rules. So our debate never got to the Christian moral system versus the secular moral system because we had a disagreement on definitions. We never got to what a Christian moral system is. And most of what I see anti-theists doing is just straw manning what Christian morality is. When you take 100 Christians off of the street, 100 random Christians off the street, and you ask them, is slavery immoral? And every single one of them says slavery is immoral. And then you say that the Christian moral system says slavery is moral. Like something.
She's right, though.
Well, your interpretation is that's a Christian moral
No,
system.
I don't think it's an interpretation. I mean, even every biblical scholar that I've listened to, including Dr. Josh, he even agrees it is they condone slavery back then. I don't think that's even up for really a discussion.
Back
is it?
then, I'm talking about modern Christianity.
Well, I mean, but I think Sarah's thing is if it's morals, then it shouldn't exactly change, right? If it was considered to be moral back then, why is it immoral now if it's a deity that has the same kind of moral basis? That's, I think, would be her argument. Again, I didn't watch the debate, but if she was going to argue it in a coherent manner, that's the way I would come from it.
Do moral systems change over time?
Yeah, but not God's.
God, yeah, exactly. The only way for Christianity to change is if there was a second revelation, another prophet that would come and change it. That is another thing that I debate with Christians, with Christian apologists, that they talk about the progressive revelation, but the progressive revelation stopped at Jesus. And Jesus didn't say slavery is wrong. Jesus said, obey your masters, and told the slavers to be kind to their slaves. So it stopped at Jesus, and Jesus didn't say slavery is wrong. Now Christians, that is what I say, Christians over time learned that slavery is bad. They learned because they started to listening to slaves, started to understand slaves as people. There also the fact that slaves started to converge to Christianity and become Christians themselves and became part of the Christendom. So there is a lot of things that happened that led to the Christians decide, okay, what we are doing to these people is wrong. But that goes against the Bible. That is something that they learn with experience. That is something that came from a secular perspective of morality, not from
it came out of the Protestant it came out of the Protestant Reformation. Okay, it didn't come out of a secular perspective.
It came from a secular perspective. What I mean by secular perspective,
you know about the Protestant Reformation.
Well, quick.
It's not from divine. It's not from divine.
Aren't you making her case for her though? If you're conceding that it was because of people learning that these things like slavery are bad through secular means, and I think, Adam, don't get me wrong, I definitely think you think that slavery is bad. Right? You think slavery is bad, correct? I would assume.
Yeah, that would be a good assumption.
Okay. I figured as much, right? So Sarah's saying that we have learned slavery is bad because of secular things that are happening. It wasn't because Jesus says slavery was bad. It wasn't because God made new commandments saying, hey, slavery is now bad. It is because people have learned that over time through secular, not through Christian things. Is that what you're saying, Sarah?
Are Protestants Christian?
Yes.
Oh, Adam.
Are Protestants Christian?
Yeah, but it wasn't a divine revelation from God that God said, hey, slavery is no longer moral. Because would you agree back then they deemed it moral?
Do you know what the Protestant Reformation is?
Yeah, Martin Luther with
100 years ago, America was founded on slavery. America updated its moral code too.
Was it okay? But that's not. But secular. It has been updated secularly.
How can you make the argument that the moral code from 1,000 years ago is the same moral code today?
Are you kidding? Adam, come on.
Because
this is from God.
2.0.
All you guys are doing. This is so unhelpful. This is so unhelpful.
Adam, I'm trying to steel man you, but this is
Christianity. Here is you. You are the person straw manning Christianity.
I think you are a little bit, Adam. I mean, let's try to suss this out because Adam, do you agree that during biblical times, the times that Sarah's talking about,
I don't care about biblical times. We're having a conversation about modern Christianity.
Listen,
okay,
no. It's important to the dialogue if you establish the base.
Important. It's
it most certainly
irrelevant.
is.
Not from a scientific perspective.
We're not talking about science. We're talking about philosophy. You're in the wrong field here. You're in the wrong genre. We're playing baseball. You're playing soccer. Okay, come on, get with the program here, Adam.
Are you pro science? It's
irrelevant. I can hate science. It has nothing to do with anything.
Okay, so it's good to know that I'm with an anti-science crowd here.
Totally anti-science. Yeah, that's because that's me. I'm totally anti-science, right? Because I'm trying to explain this is philosophy, not science. Yeah.
Science is the first thing people throw out the window when it disagrees with their cherished.
This has absolutely nothing to do with science.
Adam, how did we disagree with science?
Well, I think he's going down a rabbit hole because he doesn't want to answer these questions. So, Adam, let me ask you again. Regardless whether you think it's relevant or not, I do think it's relevant. I'm pretty sure Sarah thinks it's relevant. Yes. I'm sure the people watching think it's relevant.
Of course it's relevant because it's important to your argument, your straw man argument.
Okay, well, then you can argue against it after I ask the question.
Okay, go ahead.
During biblical times, was it considered moral to have slaves?
I have no idea. I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm studying religion from a scientific perspective, from an evolutionary perspective, from a modern perspective.
Okay, so
all of my reading has to do with modern Christianity.
So Sarah, let me ask you, during biblical times, from your readings and everything that I've ever talked to with anybody that knows anything about the Bible, it is pretty much ubiquitous among scholars that during those times, it was not only moral, it was codified in a way to explain to people how to properly do it morally.
Why do we have to go to biblical times?
And the codification on the Bible prescribes how to treat your slaves. What are the how people are enslaved? What are the criteria? How you determine those things?
Right. Why do we have to go back to biblical times? Why don't we just go to the Constitution where slaves were 3/5 of a white person?
Because the biblical times is the source of morality for Christians.
Yeah, that was the bedrock. You have to go to the foundations, man.
Well, it's changed. There's a very good book. It's called The Evolution of God by Robert Wright. I encourage you to read it.
I said to you on Twitter that, if it's changed because people change their minds about it, then it's secular. And that's what I say. That is another thing that I think you don't understand, is that I don't know what is the position of other anti-theists, but my position is the progression from Christianity to a secularism. It's not a rupture from overnight. It's something that happened progressively. And the more we distance ourselves from the Bible and from the moral code by God, is how it becomes more and more secular. That is my argument. It's not that we simply decided one day we are no longer listening to God and we're going to just do whatever we want. It's something that happened progressively and happened inside Christianity when the authority of the Pope started to be questioned.
Who questioned the very good. I'm glad you brought that up. Who questioned the authority of the Pope?
Yes, I know. That's exactly what I said. It started within Christianity.
Yeah, it was
Christians
a schism.
Started to questioning the authority of the Pope.
It was literally a schism.
Yeah, it was called the Protestant Reformation.
Yes, and what happened in the Protestant Reformation? The idea of secularism was created, where you have a spiritual, you have a temporal realm and a spiritual realm, and you have two sources of power from each.
No,
so
the Vatican being the source of the from
the
Vicar
Vatican
Christ.
Had both.
Yeah.
Yes, the Pope was the source of power for secular law, so they rule our world. The Pope was effectively the emperor of Europe, and also the source, not exactly the source, but
he was a vicar of Christ. He spoke for God.
Yeah, he spoke for God. He was a steward of God, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the Protestants broke that and divided the two things. So you have the church, or the Protestant church, you have the clergyman as responsible as the steward for the spiritual power, and the kings as the stewards, as the rulers of the secular world, of the temporal world. But the source of power of kings, was still God. During that period, the Protestant Reformation was not against. The idea was not going against the Bible, or that we shouldn't follow the moral code of the Bible, or that the ultimate authority of all affairs was God. God was still the ultimate authority for everything, and the power of kings came from God. God was God. That's the whole idea of having of justifying monarchy. It was because they were chosen by God, and that was one step. The second step was during the Renaissance, when we started to go back to Greece and Rome, studying those texts, studying that philosophy, and look there. Hey, there is another thing from philosophy that we can get from that doesn't come from God, come from the Romans, come from the Greeks, that are interesting. So we started interjecting those things in our moral codes, and then when you get to the U.S. Constitution, and we got to the Declaration of Man and Citizen from the French Revolution, there were two documents that don't claim to have divine origin. They are inspired by reason. They are inspired by a secular morality that doesn't come from God. Their authority is reason and wisdom. Their authority is temporal. What makes the Constitution, the authority from the Constitution comes from the people. It doesn't come from God.
That's a big difference between that and divine command theory, right?
And that is the big
Yeah.
the disruption that happened with the U.S. Constitution and the document from the 1791 French Revolution Constitution, French Constitution that emerged from the French Revolution. Those are the two first legally binding documents that didn't claim to have any authority from God.
Yeah, they were purely secular in nature. Real quick, couple of super chats. Adam Morgan, $2. Gary Edwards needs to come on. He is. Matter of fact, actually, Dr. Edwards, people don't know who he is. He's a philosopher. He's a friend of mine, and he actually said to me on just recently, he's like, "You need to get me on one of these things." And I've been, dude, I've been trying to forever. So he really does want to come on. We will get Dr. Edwards on. He's amazing. Let's see here. Jim Hale says $5. I have a simple morality guide. Be a dude, not a dick. Do no harm, but take no shit. It's done me good so far. There's actually a moral thing like that. The golden rule, right? The categorical imperatives and things of that nature, where do no harm to others. Like the Wiccan Creed is a reed that says, "Do what thou wilt, at least no harm come to others." Don't do anything against other people that you would give them harm to them. This is basically the same thing with etymologia and what Harris is talking about as far as objective morality and grounding it in that. But there's something I think that transcends most cultures. I mean, if there's a moral code that says, hey, you know what, it is a good thing to eat your babies, eat all the babies you can, that society's probably not going to last very long, right? Because it obviously isn't flourishing. It's gonna die out. So people would realize this is probably not a morally good thing to do. One more. This was from, I just saw another one. Serbia fight. Gosh darn it. Serbia had one. Now I lost it again. One sec. I'll find it. Oh, there it is. Serbia, $5. One monk who devotes to peace but doesn't accept Jesus. One serial killer who is Christian. What's moral of sending the monk to hell and killer saved? So what I think he's asking is, in a Christian perspective, if you're a serial killer and you pray for forgiveness, you accept Jesus, John 3:16, you're saved. But then you have a monk who doesn't accept Jesus, who's Buddhist or something, and just lives his entire life given to others and doing good acts and charity and that stuff. Why should, under a Christian moral framework, why should the monk be sent to hell for not believing or not accepting Christ, and the serial killer get to go to heaven? What is moral about that from the Christian view? I think he's asking. Anybody want to take that one? Because I mean, it's a standard question. People have asked that question for many times. Something very similar. What is it in Christianity that makes one thing moral than another? Just because God says, "Believe me, or else suffer the consequences." Is that a moral, ethical proclamation?
Well,
personally, I think no, but
I call God a cosmic dictator. He is the ultimate judge, the ultimate source of everything, the source of morality. He is the jury, the judge, and the legislator. He's everything. So the whole power is centered in one figure. It's a form of authoritarianism on a cosmic, celestial emperor.
He is God.
Can you set your feelings about that aside for a second and think of it from a materialist perspective, from a scientific perspective?
No, I think
then that's fine.
Let me tell you why. First, I missed a super chat. Rodent, no last name, $5. Is throwing yourself in a grenade virtuous for protecting other people, or is it against God for being suicidal or for being suicide? Which is a very similar question I used to ask, by the way. I used to ask the question, remember the movie Armageddon? Where, spoiler alert, Bruce Willis stays behind to blow up the asteroid.
Oh God, I was going to watch that this week.
Yeah, well, hey, it's been a while. Suck it up. But does he get to go to heaven or hell because he's effectively committing suicide while saving other people, which is something that is altruistic in that regard. I don't know how a Christian would actually answer that question, but for somebody in the military that throws himself in the grenade, that's a virtuous act, right? That is something that would be a morally good act to do because you're protecting other people. I don't see a morally just God saying, hey, you know what you did was really good, but you committed suicide, you're going to hell. But to answer your question, no, I think emotions are very intertwined with morality. I think you can't just look at it in a very septic environment. I think that we are moral creatures because we are moral agents. We're agents of moral consideration because we have things like empathy. Empathy is a feeling. Empathy is an emotion. If it wasn't for empathy, we probably wouldn't have things like morals. We wouldn't need them. We would just be automatons, or it'd be just like any other brute animal. This is the reason why we have morality, because I think that we empathize with other people. So you can't distance yourself from it and say, well, forget the feelings. But Sarah, do you agree on that? Does that make sense to you, that because we have empathy, it's a critical part of our morality?
Of course, that is something that evolved with us because we are a social species. We
Right.
are social species. We have empathy. One thing that I was talking to one of Adam's followers in the comment section of our original debate is that our empathy started as something local, as something that we have empathy because we have codependence with people surrounding us. We depend on them, they depend on us, and that's why we are empathetic. That's something that is a trait that evolved with us because it's beneficial to the survival of our clan, of our family, etc., the people who are immediate to us. When we started expanding, creating bigger communities, when we started trading to people from far away, we started to be more mutually dependent. That codependence started to spread. And that cultural trade also happened. And we started to learn more about them. And we started to be more empathetic by people that are not only around us. And this is a progress that started all the way from thousands of years ago. And we are reaching a point now that we are becoming empathetic to other animals too. And this is this progression that I talk about. And it is an evolutionary thing. It's not, but it's not an evolutionary. It's not biological. It's a social evolution, if you might call it. That something that we learn over time, is especially because of how we started to interact with others and become dependent on one another.
Absolutely.
So,
Are you saying emotions are not biological?
no,
I think you
didn't
said it's
say
the opposite.
that.
Yeah.
You just said it's not biological. What did you mean?
I said the evolution is not biological. The evolution of our morality is
You
not
said it's
biological.
not biological, that it's
Sociological. It's much sociology than biology.
Yeah, but the individual emotions, those aren't biological.
That's not what she's saying.
That's
I
not
think
what I'm talking about.
you're doing a weird reductionist approach. She's talking about
She said it's not biological. I'm just asking for a clarification. What is not biological about emotions?
I said the evolution of how we came to our morality. That we used to be very related to the clan, defending the clan, the well-being
Right.
of the clan.
That's biological. Yes. Kin selection.
Yes. Now we have a point that we think about human rights, about all of humanity. It's a progression. It's an evolution that is not biological. It's evolution that happens through culture.
it's social evolution.
So yeah, it's social. Exactly.
Yeah, two more real quick. Defiant, $5. Steve, I've been meaning to ask, how much do you need per month to sustain your YouTube activism and endeavors? I don't have a minimum. I'm already above my minimum to survive this month, especially because people have been coming over from other channels and stuff like that. So anything that people donate, I'm happy for. I'm not one of those people that go, oh well, I have to have this much I'm going to do this regardless if people donate or not, because this is what I do. This is what I enjoy. And if people enjoy it as well, that's more the better, right? But there's really no answer to that question because I'm not at that point where I was like last month.
$10,000.
Yeah, that worked too. Yeah, $10,000 a month, and I will, I'll be a Trump supporter for $100,000 a month. No, not even. It'd take a lot more than $100,000 for that. Trust me. Night Demon, $5. Don't forget to like, sub, and share this video if you like it. If it's the lifeblood of YouTube content creators. Thank you, Night Demon. I appreciate that. By the way, a lot of changes with YouTube content creators, and I don't think some of it's for the benefit of the content creators. I tweeted it out to YouTube that I think they're making some very poor judgment calls, and I think that they're harming content creators. Thomas Westbrook just recently I guess got a strike for basically calling out Matt Powell and having a conversation. Wasn't it Matt Powell? I believe. I think it was. He was calling out somebody. You know.
Yeah, it was some of these radical bastards.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was calling out homophobia and
Yeah.
strike homophobic content.
Terrible.
What a bad thing to do on YouTube. I mean, what kind of person does that? He calls out people that want to put gay people to death. I don't get that at all. Yeah, no, I mean, it just makes no sense to me that YouTube is cracking down on that. I mean, that's the kind of activism that I think YouTube should have.
It makes sense on the thing, on the grand scheme of things, that YouTube is becoming far more exclusive and corporate. Now YouTube created a system where people have to, they can create entire channels where you have to have a subscription to access. So
and I don't like that at all.
To watch CNN on YouTube, you're gonna have to pay. Otherwise, you won't be able to watch CNN.
I hate that, to be honest with you. I think the subscription thing for YouTube is just absurd. Now, maybe there's some other. I get things like the high end stuff. Maybe if there's something like there's a series on comedy, what is it, College Humor, that is pretty funny. I can see people subscribing to that, which is that Katie Kingpin Katie. But I happen to like her. She's funny and she's cute. But yeah, for any regular channel, I couldn't imagine a subscription. I wouldn't want anybody to subscribe to this channel where they have to subscribe to get the content. That's not what I do. I want people to have the content. If they happen to like it, great. But I would never do a subscription thing for this channel. It makes no sense to me. The joint thing is one thing. They get benefits and stuff like that. But to say, oh, you can't watch my stuff unless you give me a certain amount of money, that's just not me. But Odian, one more time, $2. If one can't empathize, then you can't be good. I think it makes it more difficult, Odian. I mean, if you can't empathize with somebody, like, for example, if I say, hey, I really like what Sarah has, I'm going to steal that object from her. Let's say she has a boombox or something. I don't know. I thought I saw a radio or something. But let's say she has a radio or something that I really want. Well, I'm just going to take it from her because I don't have empathy what it's like to know what it's like to have something taken from me. But because I have that experience, because I have that knowledge, I'm less likely to do it to somebody else. And I think empathy plays a huge part. I think it's Wittgenstein, actually, who grounded our objective morality in empathy, if I'm not mistaken. I know Harris did in More Idea, Harms and Benefits, and I'm pretty sure it was Wittgenstein in empathy, but somebody might correct me on that. But it would make sense to do so, right? If you are empathetic to a person, you're less likely to do harm to them. I think it's compassion and empathy, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The whole thing about empathy, yeah, if we know that if we hurt someone, we're going to feel bad because we can project that. We can understand how to be in that person's shoes and understand their suffering. So that is empathy. You had a question, Adam?
Yeah, I was curious because you were saying how much you like Gary Edwards. I've done maybe 3 or 4 live streams with Gary Edwards, and Gary Edwards is a Haidt fan. Like, he understands the evolutionary argument for morality. Like, we tend to agree on the evolutionary argument for morality. So I think if you do a live stream with him, it would be interesting for him to explain my argument to you, since you don't seem to understand it from me.
Maybe.
So where are we clashing then here? Where are we clashing? Because I think morality also evolved. I don't disagree with that, but it didn't evolve in the last 2,000 years.
Well, if
the last 2,000 years biologically we didn't change.
Our disagreement is you're saying you're taking a random group of Christians from millennia ago and saying that's the morality we're going to compare to secular morality present day. And it's like you're cooking the books. It's not a fair comparison.
Well, I could easily say the same thing to you, that you are getting 100 random people on the street and saying that is Christianity. That is the problem of what you're doing. I can easily apply it to you.
No, but we agree. We agree. Hey, we agree that morality is a set of rules, correct?
Sure.
I already explained that is a simplification, but let's go with it. Yes. So
Gary Edwards, Jonathan Haidt, we're talking about comparing moral systems. Like, Jonathan Haidt very clearly lays out that liberals have a different moral system than conservatives have a moral system. I agree with
that. Yeah.
So we can compare those empirically. And Gary Edwards is an empiricist. He wants to compare them empirically. Trial and error. That's what empiricism is.
Sure.
but with physical evidence, not with just navel gazing.
I don't think anybody's
But
going to have a problem with that.
How does that contradict anything I said?
Because if we're empirical about this, and we're going to determine what modern Christianity is, the set of rules that makes up modern Christianity, we can't look at the Bible. We have to look at the interpretation of the Bible,
which are
and
many.
Well, but the
yes,
whole
I
point.
agree. I completely agree. Okay, and what we're talking about the Protestant Reformation, the Protestant Reformation, which you were talking about pretty clearly, was the democratization of interpretation. Okay, we're upset with the Catholic Church. Hey, look who's interrupting who, Steve?
Damn it, Sarah.
Okay, it's difficult.
This is why we can't take Sarah out anywhere, and we can't have nice things.
I let Sarah go on for a good 10 minutes.
She's excited
without interrupting. Okay, I took my notes. Like, I'm trying to make an
You took
argument
notes?
here. Like, when you sidetrack, it's impossible.
You actually took notes?
Yeah, the democratization.
Nice,
like, are we
okay.
talking about the Protestant Reformation or what?
I thought we were past that, but that's okay.
Protestants. Well, I thought eventually we were going to get back to it. I like to have some substance to my live streams. I don't like to just babble.
Yeah, no, I listen to some of your live streams, and I know you've had Gary Edwards on numerous times.
Yeah. So Protestantism is the democratization of interpretation of the Bible, and that allowed the interpretation of the Bible to change. Now, even in the United States, we have a Supreme Court that interprets the Constitution, right? And there are two different philosophies on how to interpret the Constitution, right? It's the spirit of the Constitution, or it's the actual intended meaning of the people that lived 200 years ago, right?
Or it's the letter of the Constitution, the letter of the law versus the spirit of law, right, versus the intention of the founding fathers.
So see, and I just found ironies of irony here. You guys are actually taking the conservative perspective on the Bible. You're saying that it's the intent, the literal interpretation of the people that lived and wrote this Bible, and that's exactly what Christian morality is.
That's not my approach.
Well, that's what you're saying Christian morality is. You're saying Christian morality, obviously,
that's how it started.
Slavery. Yes, but the interpretation over time changed.
But that's the whole argument.
Which is the morality, the text or the interpretation?
You know what I think is funny, Adam, and I'm gonna let Sarah go in a second. I think you get so lost in minutia, you lose the big picture. Because the big picture,
you could steel man my argument.
Well,
Steve.
believe it or not, I probably could, but I'm
Go
not
ahead.
going to real quick.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so you're arguing that, like the Constitution, can be looked at multiple different ways. A strict constitutionalist will look at it as the letter of the law, vice the spirit of the law. Somebody might actually look at it and say, what was the intent of the founding fathers, such as like the Second Amendment, well-regulated militia? It doesn't have the same meaning that it would today, so to speak, because the weaponry has completely changed, because back then they had muskets, they have automatic weapons. Things have changed according to what they understood these things to be as compared to what a modern constitutionalist would be. But when it comes to the Bible, right, she's arguing that if you're going to look at Christian morality, you have to look at the foundations of it. And if it is a Christian morality, they have the belief that God morality should not change, because whatever God deems is moral is moral. Now, you have two options. God could say something is moral 2,000 years ago. He can change his mind because he's God. That's allowed. Although Christians would have a hard time, I think, justifying that. But they could argue that morality has from God is decided for whatever reason, arbitrary, that slavery is now not immoral. Not moral, and now is now immoral. Or they can say, God planned this all along. God made it, back then it was immoral, but, he knew that later on, as people grew more and learned more, it would now become something that considered immoral. But either way, something changed in the Christian belief system. And that's what her argument is. If you're looking at a Christian belief system over a secular, it's the secular things that are making the changes. So if that's the case, wouldn't secular be a higher moral good than the Christian moral good? And I'm trying to steel man her argument too, but I think that's...
You just said something changed in the Christianity.
Because morality, back then slavery was immoral, today it's moral. Did God change that?
You haven't steel man my argument, but just to get back to the Supreme Court thing, do we live do we live under the textual law of the Constitution or the interpretation of the
Depends
Constitution?
on which side of the fence you fall on. There's the strict
Hey,
constitutionalists.
hold on. No, that's not true. Because like right now, abortion's legal because of the interpretation of the Constitution.
Right, but that's one way of looking at it. There's other people out there that are strict constitutionalists.
Right, but what do
Depends
we
on
live under?
half the stream. I think some of the
What
people in the
do we
Supreme
live
Court are
under?
one way and some of the other way.
What do we live under?
Right now, we tend to go as not actual strict constitutionalists. It's more leaning toward
I'm asking
interpretation.
you a very specific question.
I just
here.
answered it. It leads more
No,
toward
you did not
interpretive.
answer. You did not. So we live under the interpretation.
How did I not? This is what I noticed about you, Adam. You keep on saying you don't answer the question when I've answered the question, and any person
I just didn't
listening could
understand
say,
you, Steve. I just
can
didn't
I say that I'm
understand.
answering the question.
We're in agreement then that we live under the interpretation. We don't live under the text.
Oh, okay, but we're again not divine command theorists. We're not.
I don't
We're
know
not.
what that has to
We're
do
not
with my
saying
question.
that secular things can't change. The Christians are saying God does not change, right? So his ethics shouldn't change.
First of all, I want to point out that there are two people here that are talking incessantly about God. Okay, and
That's the whole debate you guys were supposed to have.
I am not one of them.
What
Okay,
am I
I'm not
missing here?
I am not a Christian. I am not here to attack
But
Christians.
you're talking
like
Christian
anything else.
morality.
I am not attacking any Christians.
No, I'm not attacking Christians. I got Christian mods. I mean, I don't care if a person's Christian.
Friend.
Speaking of Christian mods, S.J. Thomason, who's a Christian mod, who was just on her channel earlier today, we had a great discussion. Go check out her channel. She says, the foundation of Christian morality is Jesus Christ. He fulfilled Mosaic law and began a new covenant. You're strawmanning us. I don't see how I am
You are
because
strawmanning them horribly.
again,
Well,
okay,
because
yeah, again,
they say that the foundation of the morality of the Bible, that's straw man.
I don't know how. Yeah, I don't know what straw. I don't. Maybe the word straw man doesn't mean the same to
I want
everybody.
to press this point.
Maybe it
I want
doesn't
to
mean
press
the
this
same.
point. Do we live in America? We have an institution there called the Supreme Court. They interpret the textual Constitution, correct?
Sure.
And that interpretation changes over time, does it not?
Yes.
Do we live under the interpretation or do we live under
I've already
the
asked that
actual
question
text?
3 times now. Yes.
We live under the interpretation. Okay. So you guys are making an interpretation of the Bible and you're saying this is Christianity.
No,
Christians are making a
oh my
completely
God.
different interpretation of the
No.
If
Bible.
anybody's being straw man, it's Sarah and I, because I don't think he's understanding
That is
this.
exactly why the debate didn't
What?
go anywhere, because you keep saying this, and that is not what I am
It
doing.
has nothing to do with what she's arguing. Even I didn't even watch the debate, and I can see why she's getting frustrated.
Hey, hold on. What are you arguing then?
What I am arguing is that the moral foundation of Christianity is the Bible.
Right.
Yeah,
And
There are
let
certain things about the Bible. There are
one
certain
moment,
things
please.
about the Bible.
One moment, please. Do we live under the biblical text or do we live under the interpretation
Oh
of
my
it?
God.
Which makes up morality?
Adam,
Which makes up morality?
Adam.
Which makes up morality? Answer the
we
question,
can-
please.
we-
Answer the question, please.
Both.
Which makes up morality?
This, in a Christian perspective, they both
Not
come into
both.
play.
So-
I beg
so
to
it's both-
differ. I beg to
Is it
differ. I
both-
beg to
is it both
differ.
With the Supreme Court? Is it both with the Supreme Court?
Okay, so is there? Wait, you say there's a Supreme Court that looks at the Bible and says this is how we're going to interpret it?
There is the Catholic Church that does interpretations. Like as far as the Protestant, what are you going to allow me to actually make an argument that you could potentially understand and steel man? I mean, just like this is so simple. How do you not understand that?
I'm thinking
Catholic
this the
Church
exact
was
same way, but in reverse.
Did the Catholic Church wasn't the Catholic Church basically the Supreme Court of the Bible? They interpreted the Bible.
She
for
had talked
everybody?
about that earlier with the Pope. Yes.
Yes. Okay. And the Protestant Reformation came along and it democratized the interpretation of the Bible, where many different people could interpret the Bible. Many different sects of Christianity came into being because they had different interpretations of the Bible, right?
Okay, so which one should we go by? Wait, if Christian, wait, let me finish. Hang on. Hey, first of all, Sarah B. $2. Why would perfect God change his mind with new covenant? Who knows? But okay, so if the debate was secular morality over Christian morality, you're talking now using your argument. Where do we interpret? What should we interpret for Christian morality? Should we go by the Catholics, the Protestant? Is slavery?
These are all different competing moralities. Okay,
But
These
they're
are
all
different-
Christian morality. This is her argument.
That is my argument, exactly. God's sake. That is my argument. So
No, your
if we are going
interpretation.
to make your own interpretation, if we allow people to make their own interpretation of the Bible, all right, then the ultimate judge of morality is no longer God. The ultimate judge of morality is us.
Yep.
It's
exactly.
secular. It's no longer Christian.
Thank you.
It's no longer spiritual.
So define secular morality then.
You might call it Christian morality, but it's not. And that's why the Protestantism, the divisions within the church was the end of Christianity. Because
how are you defining secular morality?
Secular morality is a morality that is not of divine origin. It's not of spiritual origin.
So we agree that morality is a set of rules, and you're just saying secular morality is not from divine origin. But I am saying Christian morality is not from divine origin either, because
I don't believe it is either. I don't believe it is either. Because I don't believe in God. I am an atheist.
So then, for the sake of argument, I agree with you. These different lists of rules that create a Christian morality are not from divine origin. They're from human interpretation. Okay.
Thus, secular. Would you? Okay, but I think you're agreeing with her argument. I mean, I'm not choosing one or another, but her argument is secular humanism is a better model for morality because you're admitting that a secular is what's causing people to be more moral than what if they would have just stuck with the Christian beliefs 2,000 years ago. What changed it? It wasn't God.
What do you mean by more moral?
Slavery is now bad.
Okay, so you're
now. I look at a different approach. To me, slavery was always bad. People just didn't recognize it.
If we didn't have so many interruptions, we could probably get actually to the.
Nobody interrupted you.
The core of the argument, like how are we comparing? Like we never got to this in the debate. How are we comparing the different moral systems? Because if you're gonna say one's better than the other, you have to have a comparison.
Okay. That might be true, but I think we've already agreed slavery is bad, right?
So you're going to compare it on one factor out of
like that's one of the things. Well, it only takes one to say that the Christian system is probably flawed because God can't be wrong.
Okay,
it only takes one.
Can I make one point without interruption here? Just
sure.
One point. We all seem to be in agreement that it's the interpretation, not the text. Right? That the moral system is about the interpretation. Like
no, I don't agree with that.
Okay. So then we don't. Then what is the moral system based on? So by then, if we don't agree to that, then there really is only one Christian group, and that's the there isn't even different sects because the different sects are formed out of different interpretations.
Sarah, go ahead.
So how is this not a no true Scotsman fallacy? How is it not a no true Scotsman fallacy?
It's not the whole thing, Adam, is that for Christian, I think your flaw here is that you are not thinking as a Christian. A Christian
I'm thinking like a scientist, okay?
And that's a problem.
You have to think like a Christian. A Christian believes in God because a Christian believes in God, and a Christian believes that the Bible comes directly from God. Is the moral code laid out by God.
Can you focus on my argument and not try to think like a Christian? I'm making a very clear argument here, okay?
What is your argument again?
The interpretation is what makes the list of rules, because the interpretation is what creates the behavior, and the behavior is what creates the moral system.
The interpretation that we make based on knowledge and our experience, which is secular, which is
how are you going to compare? Like you're fixated on slavery. How many moral systems today condone slavery? Like how many of these competing moralities that are in the world condone slavery?
Because we've learned through experience to talk into slavers.
I'm not asking you about how it came into existence. I'm asking you how many in the number of moral systems condone slavery today, present day. Like Mormons.
I don't think it's relevant, to be honest with you.
Secular human, why do you keep? I would love it not to be relevant, so that we could stop.
Because the Bible, it shouldn't change.
The only reason, because we learned through experience, we learn through reason.
How many? Take a guess. How many?
I would say zero. Well, I mean,
I'm going to guess zero too.
But there might be some Islamic countries that condone slavery.
Okay,
but Adam, I think it boils down to this. I'm letting some people in. By the way, I want to thank Biblical History Skeptics for letting me use Zoom. He'll be in, and Jess will be in here soon. But Okay, and I want to make it very simple here. The argument can be boiled down to a very, very simple thing. Slavery at one time was moral. It is not moral now. The reason by which was not because of a change through Christian theology. It was a change through secular means. She's arguing because that change came through about by secular means and societal changes, that means it's a higher moral good than listening to what Christians would have been if they hadn't had that change, because God never changed it. God never said slavery is no longer moral. And so if those changes did not occur because of secular means, we would still have slavery. If I had to paraphrase her argument.
On the chat, a little 84 asked, how many Christians today think it's moral to kill gays? So there we have it. Exactly, there you have it.
Quite a number. And yeah.
The Bible.
And that's from the Levitical law. I mean, you could pick anyone, and it only takes one to say there's some immoral, completely immoral things going on, right? Villeran for 5.
Secular means to be absolutely immoral.
Yeah.
To kill people because of the sexuality.
And that happens over in the Arab country all the time. They'll throw gay people off roofs. How is that moral? Villeran for $5 says, "What's the difference between a biblical interpretation and a secular interpretation according to Adam, who interprets it?" I think he kind of explained that. A secular interpretation, I think, looks at it not through the eyes of any kind of divine command theory, or to look at it through how God did something rather than a more naturalistic viewpoint. But hey, Chesh.
Hey, what up?
What up, you immoral individual? You are so immoral. You just immoral. There we go.
Oh no, that's absolutely correct. Yeah. I am not a good person.
You got your big bottle of wine today?
I do. I should have been pre-drinking for this.
Yeah, we all should have been drinking for this.
But I'm being tagged in. So
yeah. High five. I had it. You got it.
So I have a question for Adam.
Please.
Adam, is the Bible a social construct?
What's that?
Is the Bible a social construct?
I have no idea what you mean by that.
You don't know what social construct means, you don't know what moral means, or you don't know what social or the word construct means. What do you not know?
I know what a social construct is, but
And you know what the Bible is, right?
It's a text compiled from many unknown authors over hundreds of years.
Cool, perfect. So what about that, putting those words together, do you not understand?
Jess is in a she's just going for blood, and I'll fix
get my fuck off out of the way.
It's not a difficult question.
Yeah, you sound like a freaking idiot.
Damn.
As I am. So explain.
Jeez, when did the principle of charity just get shit all over?
Anyone that follows Jordan Peterson's ideas doesn't have a say.
Okay, we don't know about Jordan Peterson. Has nothing to do with Jordan Peterson.
Oh, don't bring Jordan Peterson.
Don't bring that in.
I'll fix the windows here in a second. While you guys have at it.
What is the Bible a social
Blood
construct?
Sports.
You said you didn't understand the question.
Yeah,
and now you're saying that
I asked for clarification, dumb shit.
Oh, come on.
So then, what do you not understand?
No, nobody's called you names, Adam.
Well, the tone is calling you the names.
Well, that's Cheshire.
I'm happy to dial it back. I'm just playing around.
Yeah, it'd be beneficial if you did.
But I don't want, obviously I don't want to make it's an unclear question. Like a social construct for me has to do with teaching somebody, like growing up over time is usually the context of that. And the Bible doesn't really, like a text that's on a shelf somewhere. How is that a social construct?
Bible school?
Let me explain. I study the Bible professionally, so that's my area. How to explain how the Bible is a social construct. It's a series of social constructs, actually. Every single bit in there is a social fucking construct. Every single bit, though, comes from a series of traditions built up over time by social groups coming together and deciding on theology, on how to interpret things, on how to interpret reality, on how to employ their religion upon the world. Everything in there is a goddamn social construct.
So it sounds like we agree then. You believe the interpretation is a morality.
What?
I don't know how that ever came close to responding to what he just said.
Well, you just said that the Bible's all about interpretation. You said it was about people coming together and talking about their interpretation.
No, I said it was about them coming together and employing their conceptions about reality and religion.
Well, you can go back and listen. He said interpretation, so.
I'm just so confused. Real quick, while you guys figure out what the hell he's talking about, because I'm not quite sure. Rodent, $5. If eating shrimp is immoral, why did God go out of his way to specifically point it out in the source text you base your morality on? Well, again, it's any of the Levitical stuff, whether it be, gay, whether it be slavery, whether it be eating shellfish or mixing fabrics. The whole argument stems from the fact that this was considered to be the moral code back then, and I wouldn't say Levitical code too much because I don't think that was really that implemented.
It's not everything in the Levitical code is actually ethical. Like for example, women having a period.
Hey, I'm gonna dive out, Steve.
Why?
Take care, man.
I showed up.
Why? Did it get a little heated for you?
I'm not into big chats. Like, if you guys want to have a constructive conversation about stuff, I'm happy to answer questions. But I don't want to get teamed up.
This is 5 people.
Yeah,
it's up to you, man. No, I mean, you do you.
I think that we agree with Adam on this point, if I'm understanding his point properly, and that is that.
I apologize for giving you a hard time. Like, if we're going to have a constructive conversation, I'm all about constructive conversations, but it seems like most of this is...
Then you shouldn't dodge questions.
Well, I'm not dodging. What questions have I dodged?
You've been dodging all day.
You asked me a completely unclear question. I asked for a clarification, and you gave me a hard time as if I didn't understand.
And then she asked you what needed clarification, and then you just insulted her like a dick.
Yeah, she was being a bitch, and that's what I usually do when people
asking for clarification is not being a bitch. Grow the fuck up.
See, this is why I'm.
Well, you, Adam, you did start the whole like.
Bullshit. You know, Steve, that she came in here and started it. I gave back what she gave, and I'm trying to dial it back. And now you got biblical history skeptic here, like trying to dial it up a notch again.
I'm trying to.
All right, let's do this.
Which way are we going to go with this?
Cheshire and
nice, or do you want to not be nice?
Cheshire and Adam have a nice, cordial conversations for a second. I got to take care of something, so you too.
Okay.
So I think
Play nice.
I understand at least what you're trying to say.
Okay, good.
Which is that if the Bible is taught throughout, then you would be willing to consider it as social construct. Because you're not talking about the divinity of the Bible, you're talking about the application of it.
The interpretation, yeah. It sounds like you agree with me then.
Yes, I agree with what you're saying. I get it. So you start running into problems there when you start saying that if the Bible is in fact a social construct and it is always humans' interpretation, whether it is or is not divinely inspired, that interpretation is secular. Because you're not using divinity to interpret it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And it sounds like you understand my argument relatively well. I've
been listening since the first stream with Sarah.
Okay, so the question that I have though is, we never got to this in the debate, is the enforcement mechanism. Because the reason why God is just the most efficient enforcement mechanism evolutionarily, because it's absolutely free. I see what you're saying. My contention would be is, when has God ever directly punished somebody that we can verify? Never. Like you and I, it sounds like you're an atheist. I'm an atheist. Like it's all in the head.
So if he's never, so what you're saying is it's a psychological.
Yeah, people curb their behavior. If you're a criminal and you think that the police, there's no chance you could get away with any crime. You think the police are apt and fully out there to apprehend anybody who does anything incorrectly. That's going to curb your behavior, your criminal activity, correct?
That's situational, but I see what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, well...
For the sake of the argument, I'll agree with you, yeah.
If a friend shows up and say, oh, the police around here, they don't know shit, like let's go rob a bank. Like, even when they've done studies, like when police departments go on strike, like a lot of criminality takes place because people know, like, the police are not there to take care of them. So God is just an effective policeman. And I don't know, how does secular morality do the enforcement?
Well, here's the thing. What you're talking about is you're agreeing that, yes, the police are a good enforcement, right? We agree.
Yeah. Well, some.
And we also, not all, but for the sake of the argument, yeah. But you also agree that God is not verifiably punishing people
God doesn't exist. We agree on that.
Right. So in that case, how could it possibly be a better enforcement system if not only we can't verify it, but also the punishment can only take place after you're dead? And on top of that, how is it not as easy to say, well, God's absentee, just like these on-strike police officers, and lots of crime can take place?
I'm unclear on the point of the argument that you're making, because I'm simply saying, just from an evolutionary perspective, like, it seems obvious why this whole moral system evolved, because evolution seizes on the most economical way to enforce certain behaviors. And if a belief in God enforces that behavior, regardless of whether or not anybody's been, like, whether or not it's truly there, it works.
Does that make it permissible if it also allots for things like slavery? Or even like, let's go witches being burned at the stake, which is currently happening to this day.
Well, I'm against all that stuff, but this is why
it doesn't matter if you're against it or not. I'm saying in the framework that you're proposing, is it permissible to allow these things to happen because God, quote unquote, says so in these societies, because we're using God as our moral enforcer?
So you just don't like, I mean, God is obviously a double-edged sword. Like, the guy who wants to do something.
Is it permissible under these rules?
No, the guy that, well, this is why I don't like talking about the God thing, because, like, let's talk about this like rationalists, okay?
Then why'd you bring it up?
Isn't God part of Christian morality, if I'm not mistaken? Yeah. By the way, I brought in a theist for you here, a Christian theist, so it's not so much, like 5-on-1 or 4-on-1, but
you can't talk about the evolutionary advantages of God,
of having a God,
without talking about him being a double-edged sword. I mean, that's just the reality of talking about that situation. End of story.
Do you believe in evolution?
Oh, for Christ's sake! Everybody in here accepts evolution.
I'm an agnostic.
Okay, so I mean,
I don't believe in Christianity.
So an adaptation just has to be, better than average to give.
Well, I would actually agree with Adam in that, yes, God was a very useful tool once upon a time to enforce morality.
Okay.
To enforce morality on people who either didn't know any better, and it is also used for people who want to enforce less than beneficial things like burning witches and slavery. So people are going to manipulate it to be whatever they want anyway. So well, I think we both agree that it did have its use. I would be willing to make the argument that it no longer does, but
I would. And I think I would like to interject one thing, that the problem, of course, and that is the double-edged source of God, is that God also can be used to justify heinous things. So that is the problem of having this ultimate moral authority as the ultimate judge of everything, because at the same time, it is helpful, it is compelling to make people do good things and not do bad things, but it's also as compelling to make people commit horrible crimes in the name of God. So that is the problem of that is an evolutionary disadvantage of having a morality based on God. So that is that point as well, that I think you might not be considering in your argument.
No, I'm definitely considering it.
I just want to say also one thing is that when we're talking about the development of deities, and my lights are flickering, you can stop that anytime. The problem that we've been having here is also the deities did not evolve and come about as a result of morals and ethics. They came about because of a result of etiology. Deities came about as explanations and anthropomorphisms of reality, not because they were trying to justify a moral system.
That's not true.
Actually, it is, and I have over 23 studies on my shelf on it.
I'd like to see those studies.
Oh, I'll send you some. I have some on PDF.
Yeah, a lot of people think that morale or religion is a failed science, but it's a way
it's a social tool. It's a social tool.
Exactly. It's not a way to explain the world. It's a way to explain the world narratively so you can live socially.
It's not well. It's more complicated than that. The problem is that we're talking about religion with really simplistic definitions, and there's some really good books on trying to define religion out right now. It is an absolute mess trying to do that because religion is one of the most complicated social developments in human history. We don't have a good idea. We don't have a totally good idea of actually how it evolved.
Chris, would you agree that we're hardwired to follow a God?
No.
Well, no, actually, no, I'm going.
Well, studies have indicated that we are actually out of the University of Oxford has conducted a number of global studies that have indicated we are actually hardwired to follow God.
You asked if I agree. I can disagree with the studies.
I think those studies are grossly misinterpreted.
Follow a God, but I am going to say that we are socially inclined to follow a God.
I wouldn't even say that. I would say we're more socially. I mean, I think that biologically we're inclined to want to because of our increased intellect and our experiences, that we want to believe things like there are like things especially that we don't have explanations for, right? That's why I think that people posit a deity for to begin with. That doesn't mean we follow any God. I don't think we don't see other species have this predilection to follow a deity, so why are we what is it about biology that makes us any different? I think it's a social thing rather than a biological thing.
Well, having the desire to follow and for there to be a leader and some kind of desire of subservience or some kind of desire to exude some kind of control over somebody's life or your own life or a desire to have some kind of semblance of understanding or of safety in a world that is very, very, very dangerous, especially if you're talking a couple hundred years ago. You start running into things that, well, maybe this God will protect me. And the thing is, which is why I would probably gripe on Adam's 100 Christians, is because every single one of those 100 Christians are all also going to have different interpretations, especially if you're talking about the born again kind of Christian, which all have a personal God, and those personal gods are all, personal.
I agree that they will have different interpretations, but it depends upon the level of the behavior that we're talking about. Like the idea, there's certain rules that all Christians, even every Christian sect, buys into. Like the Christians down.
No, he's correct. Let him go on.
Well, I agree with most of that. I start disagreeing as soon as you start looking at the multiple.
The divinity of Jesus. Like if you don't believe in the divinity of Jesus, then you're not a Christian.
Okay, but what if you throw in Catholics, because they're still Christians?
They believe in the divinity of Jesus.
Yeah, so but they also believe. Yes, but they also agree. They also agree in the divinity. They also disagree. Sorry, about the divinity of Mary.
But you have a group of 2 billion people.
No, that's not. I can speak as a Catholic, a former Catholic. I'm a Baptist now, but I was a former Catholic. I was raised a Catholic. I went to Catholic grade school, Catholic high school for my first year, and we absolutely do not agree that Mary is divine.
What's a Hail Mary then?
We revere Mary, but we never agreed that she's divine.
Well, hang on. She's she acts as an intercessory between God and people. Prayer. She's an intermediary person. That has to be some kind of divine status to do that.
Well, the Catholics also revere many saints. So the Catholics we pay reverence to the saints. We pay reverence to Mother Mary. And we feel that they should be hailed, they should be valued, and that she's a vessel for Jesus. So she represented a very strong person in our background. However, we don't say that Mary is part of the Trinity. The Trinity,
right? But she still acts. But she still acts as something to do intercession with between God and the prayer.
That's not saying she's divine.
No, I know Catholics don't think she's divine. I do understand that, but I think that I look at it and I think Catholics are wrong in that approach. If she is having some interaction between God and man to facilitate prayer requests, there's something divine there. I just, maybe it's just empowerment, but
Steve, think of it more akin. So the way that they go about revering Mary, yes, they revere Mary in different ways than you would someone around you, but at the same time, when they do like the Hail Mary and stuff like that, it's basically akin to me asking a friend of mine to pray for me.
Yeah, I don't know, but it seems. I get that. No, I understand the concepts.
It's a concept of intercession,
right?
Of divinity, and when we talk about religion, if they are not revering them as a divine being, in that sense, like a god or anything like that, then we can't actually consider them on that level.
But
in order to be classified along those levels, they have to be actually fitting both a mythological and a ritualistic level.
Yeah, but now you're talking about
the difference between Catholics, because in Latin America, Mary is divine. Mary, pray to Mary.
It does depend on your branch of Catholic.
Right.
Yeah. On top of that, if you want a really good example, the town I grew up in, there's a church called the Church of Our Lady, and you want to know what all over that place? Mary. The very front, Mary.
Yeah, she's revered.
At the front, Mary. You know who's not there? Jesus.
Yeah, so I mean, she is revered in that particular sect.
It's almost like there's contradictions and stuff is inconsistent. Weird.
Let me. I know
start arguing theology.
Everyone likes to make Catholics look bad, and I am not. As I said, I left the Catholic Church, and I left in my 20s because I was disturbed by what was going on in the church with respect to the priests and the kids. However, I don't think it's right to put Catholics and paint them in a bad light purely because.
Oh, I'm not trying to do that at all.
What about them worshiping Mary as a bad light?
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad light. What about them
worshiping Mary as a bad light?
No, what I'm saying is they don't value. I mean, I can't say this now because Sarah said that in Latin America and in Brazil, where she's from, that yes, they do revere Mary as divine. Now, I haven't heard that from my. I have actually a lot of Brazilian friends. I actually just worked with a Brazilian PhD student for the last 6 months, and he never said anything about Mary being divine. So it's not. I don't think this is something that's in every church.
I wouldn't say so much in Brazil. I would say more in the Andes.
I want to get back to Adam real quick and get back to the topic.
Yeah, totally. I
just want to add one note here.
One note, then back to the topic.
What we need to be doing here is being careful about how we talk about religion and different sects of faith. Catholicism is not a conglomerate. There are different groups within Catholicism. There are different groups within Orthodoxy. There are different groups within Protestantism. We can't talk about them as any kind of conglomerate whole. It's simply methodologically wrong.
Well, my only point was a moral system involves a list of rules, and anyone who agrees to adhere to that list of rules opts into that moral system. And Christianity, there is, like I said, there's a hierarchical list of rules because there's one rule that every single Christian sect has to adhere to, otherwise they technically aren't even Christians. And then there's these secondary rules, like whether or not Mary is divine.
Well, yeah, okay, let's take this down a little bit of a different road and detract from Catholics, because what about working on the Sabbath? Because there are different sects that agree and disagree about that. You've got Chick-fil-A, who keeps their doors closed, but they're also not going out and stoning people. But in other countries, they are. So
I could answer that.
Well, I'll let you answer. I'm just saying that we could argue about the list of rules, but until we develop some sort of scientific architecture to rank those systems of those moral sets of rules, then we're just having a conversation about our feelings.
Yeah, no, I agree. Sorry, SJ, just before I just want to address that before you jump in.
So in the Old Testament,
or not,
in the Old Testament, as you all know, probably you've heard of it, we have 10 commandments. And in the New Testament, when the apostles actually asked Jesus, they said, what commandments should we follow? And he simplified them into 2. He said, love the Lord above all else and love your neighbors as yourself. You'll notice he did not say follow the Sabbath, do not do any work on the Sabbath. He actually didn't say that, which is why the Christians and the early Jewish people were so willing to actually leave Saturday Sabbath practice of not doing any work and to move into, many of them started worshiping on Sunday. But the idea from many perspectives, and I've actually heard this with a number of Christians and a number of different sects, is that Jesus essentially is the Sabbath. We're revering him. And so we don't have to not work on Saturday or Sunday. Now, I know Chick-fil-A has taken Sunday off and its workers have Sundays off. That's their interpretation. And I don't think that just because people have different interpretations is any good reason to discount the entire message.
So what happens if I tell you that George Carlin said it better than Jesus did?
Carlin is an atheist.
Yeah, and he said Jesus's rules better than Jesus did. So what does that tell you? What's your response to that?
I really don't. What should I respond to George Carlin?
Well, I'm asking, if I tell you that George Carlin said it better, then where does that rank Jesus?
Well, I don't
as
value
a moral teacher.
Number one, I don't value George Carlin's opinion over Jesus.
That's kind of irrelevant.
Even though he said it better, doesn't matter.
Yeah, if he said it better, he said it better. You can't. What you're doing is a genetic fallacy. Who cares what the source was? If a person said it better and you agree it's better, then she has an argument. The source doesn't matter. That's you will admit would be a genetic fallacy.
I don't agree that George Carlin said anything better than Jesus. So that's all I'm saying.
Always be faithful and honest to the keeper of thy nookie, and don't be a dick. That is
pretty forthright. Pretty straightforward, right?
Better but also not only is it better, more broad and more straightforward at the same time, but it's a little bit more eloquent for our times.
If it's vulnerable.
Well, I wouldn't say that in a college classroom. I'll put it that way. So I would much
okay, fair point.
Say something that I'm not going to repeat those kind of words in a college classroom.
What nookie or asshole?
Either of them.
In
any
college?
Of it. I wouldn't.
That is pretty tame, but still, I wouldn't either.
Very tame.
Yeah, but even still, I wouldn't
say that in a college classroom. It's completely unprofessional.
Yeah, I have to go with
that. I would anything Jesus said in a college classroom, although I don't, because I teach in a secular university.
Would it be? No, never mind. I'm not going to go there. Anyway, Adam,
the wine's kicking in. You
understand though that the set of rules is going to produce a certain outcome, and then you're measuring which produces the best outcome. So
right. Set of rules and best outcome. So if we have a set of rules that produces an outcome where people are getting burned at the stake, and we have a set of rules where that is not the case, which is better?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it depends upon whether or not you're going for like a utilitarian outlook or
I'm going for like the well-being of most people. So if you're
going for this is a problem with utilitarianism.
The reason you're getting burned at the stake is for being a witch
specifically. Right. This is a problem with utilitarianism, because if we're burning a few witches a year and everyone's living like rich, fat, high off the hog, but all we have to do is sacrifice witches.
That's bringing in economics.
Real quick. Is there anybody appealing to utilitarianism here? Because I haven't heard anybody make that argument.
I hate utilitarianism.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it either. So I don't know why you keep defaulting back to that, Adam. You're arguing against something that nobody's actually positing. But a couple more super chats, real quick, if I get them in.
Well, no, actually, Steve, I don't think I think he's fair to say that, because Cheshire was definitely positing goals, and
goals are fine. That's not utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is for the benefit of all.
Consequences.
Utilitarianism is a principle that whatever is good is the best for a society as a whole, as for a group.
It's greater good for the greatest number of people.
Exactly.
Yeah, Spock is a utilitarian.
Yeah, so Steve, you could do super chats and I'll clarify a little bit.
All right. So see here. Odian, so if one can't empathize, then you can't be good. I think we addressed that one. Serbia, is altruism in politics really communism? Fine line. I don't think altruism is actually a thing. But I actually argue that there's no such really thing of it. But Odian, one shouldn't need empathy.
You're just mean, Chris.
One shouldn't need to empathize to be good. S.J. Thomason, I already read that one. I don't know how I skipped a few. Serbia, why would a perfect God change his mind with a new covenant? Biblical history skeptics. Adam's understanding of theology is that of a tuna fish. He's a Poe of the highest order at this point. Ouch.
Oh.
Yeah, I know.
Ouch.
That came from Chris.
Yeah, I don't think Adam's a Poe.
I was mad at you, Adam, because I was getting really mad.
Yeah, I don't think Adam's a Poe, but Adam has this weird ability to just not take anything that's being said to him directly what it is. He'll find something that's completely tangential, unrelated, and I've seen him do it numerous times. No offense, Adam, but when you have a whole bunch of people that are on the same page, and all of a sudden you say, "Oh, you're not answering the question," or you go off on this weird tangent that is completely unrelated, I don't think it's our epistemic issues that are happening there. I think it's something along your lines.
Chad, a Poe is somebody who doesn't actually believe this shit.
Yeah, and I think he literally does believe this. He actually thinks he's putting forth good arguments.
Yeah, totally. My arguments are sound and scientific. They're based on,
the 100 Christians is not that great.
Well, they've done tests.
They've done tests. They've tested.
No, seriously. Yeah, they've done economic tests where they bring people into the lab and they let them. The only thing they can disclose to one another is their religious affiliation, And as soon as they realize they're all on Team Christian, they clean up in these economic games. I mean, that's a scientific experiment.
Well, okay, so here's the contention.
Other than when they decide to start talking theology, and
then they kill each other. Real quick, I have two more. Real quick. No to dogma. Compare a modern Christian society with a modern secular society using specific metrics, which I think that's what they were supposed to do in their debate kind of thing. Ethologos. Adam, do you believe that you are incapable as a mortal as the most moral God believers simply because they believe in God and you don't? Thanks.
They're asking if you think you're more moral than somebody who believes in God.
My moral, I was raised a Christian, so like my morality, I do reflexively. Like I learned to be moral when I was a believer. Now that I'm not a believer, I just reflexively act in the same way because I just feel bad not acting in that way.
So you haven't changed your morals.
So you're moral because other people are moral. That's reflexivity.
What's that?
You're moral because other people are moral.
No, I am moral because I grew up.
You were taught to be moral.
Yeah, I was taught to be.
I'm the same thing. I mean,
No, that's hold on. This is really, really interesting. Because does that mean? And I don't. This isn't an attack. I'm honestly asking. I'm not trying to lead you anywhere.
Don't believe her.
Sure
don't believe her. It's a trap.
Don't believe me. It's a trap.
Well, my Christian upbringing forces me to believe.
Never trust a Canadian.
I said at the beginning that I am not a moral person. So take that for what you will. If that is the case, have you not changed your stances on anything from that point onward?
What do you mean?
So, if the church that you grew up in had a moral stance on something, you haven't changed what your personal position is. It still remains whatever that church was.
Well, if you're gonna go to like something like abortion, I don't necessarily know what the moral stance was on abortion.
Yeah, no, I'm just
like
curious.
The teachings of Jesus, like love thy neighbor, go out of your way to help people, like reflexively when people ask you for help, give them help, like all that stuff. Yeah, I feel
shit
bad
that has nothing to do with Christianity.
General generosity.
Yep.
You don't think that has anything to do with Christianity? You don't think being embedded in a group of people that always espouse these values and judge each other based on
because they don't always espouse those values.
Well, they did in my church, so.
Not in mine.
Okay. Well, maybe that was bad.
Well, anybody that I've spoken to.
Bad. I mean, what's bad is going to be a matter of perspective here.
Yeah, definitely.
There's also something to be said.
If you were raped by a Catholic priest, like you should hate religion. I guarantee you. You should despise religion with every fiber of your being.
I think that there's the reason I ask is just because I think this is a really interesting train of thought, because it begs the question is, have you questioned those morals that you learned?
Yeah. Yeah. Question everything. I'm a total questioner. Like, yeah.
So you questioned these things, but didn't come, like you were just like, no, the conclusion is fine.
I'm more interested in religion from a scientific perspective than anything. Like all you guys are arguing about is like the list of rules, and I'm interested in how do we make that list of rules better. Like you're making an assertion, and anti-theists make this assertion all the time. They say, well, those morals were good back then, but they're not necessarily good now. And I go, how do you know that? Like, how do we know that if you're not doing scientific experiments?
I'm not. I can answer that real quick. I'm not an empiricist. I'm not I don't fall into scientism. I don't think it matters at all whether we do scientific experience on that. This is a philosophical genre. I think you're out in left field trying to bring science into a question about morality. To me, it is almost nonsensical to do so. I do believe there's certain things we can and cannot test for in sociology that can do certain experiments. But as a whole, I don't think science is the right tool to use for any of this. I just don't.
Well, E.O. Wilson disagrees.
Well, he can disagree all he wants, but that's the greatest thing about philosophy. In philosophy, there's disagreement.
I actually agree with Adam.
The biologizing of ethics. So it's about taking ethics out of the philosophy departments and putting it in the science departments.
Yeah, and I think that's absurd.
I think that's interesting.
Yeah, it's totally
something
interesting.
That's worth exploring, even if it doesn't function, because I'm not sure if it would be functional. But the point would be to make ethics functional. Right?
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. So
Sarah watched one of my videos on moral foundations theory. Moral foundations theory is the idea that we all have these moral intuitions about things. And I think that's really what you're talking about.
Have any of them.
What's that?
I can guarantee I don't have any of them.
Well, then you're a psychopath. That's
No,
Chris.
The
There you go,
moral
Chris. You must be a
foundations that
psychopath.
everyone has, Chris, and I'm sure you do have it, are care and harm and equality, a focus on equality. So those are the two foundations that everybody shares. And then there's the ones that go beyond that, and that's according to Jonathan Haidt.
Yeah.
I value equality, but beyond that, I don't really care.
Me and
But do you value care for other people?
No.
Could you kick a puppy?
Yeah. I
Yes.
don't like.
Oh.
I don't
Well,
like.
Wow.
That's sad.
He's not a nice
There's
person.
something me and Chris actually have this in common. Now I don't know if Chris is actually a psychopath, or if Chris is a sociopath, or if Chris has come to this conclusion on his own front.
Or
But
he's
I am-
faking it.
And
Or
what are
he's
you?
faking it. Maybe he's faking
What about
it.
you, Cheshire?
I'm a sociopath. I've
Oh,
had
okay.
previous trauma that has essentially broken the connection there. So
Really?
what I do to deal with that is I overcompensate. So I can't empathize. So what I do is I use sympathy to overcompensate for my lack of empathy. So I do my best to understand this person from a logical and from I understand that you're having these emotions. I don't feel these emotions. I know what these emotions are. I still have my own emotions, but I can't feel for you.
So you don't have a
she lacks
problem
a
with
lot-
throwing gays off of rooftops then?
Of course I do, because
Well,
that's
then-
not what I said at all.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm
So,
just saying a psychopath would not care.
Yeah, that's why I said I was a sociopath.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So
I think everybody's a sociopath to some degree. A sociopath is everybody has a little sociopath.
Well, no, it's only
Empathy
3% of
only
the
goes-
population. Sociopaths are 3%. Psychopaths are 1%.
Yeah, well,
Empathy
psychopath is a
only-
more hardcore version of sociopath.
only-
But
Yeah,
I think
I can say that I do feel empathy for people, but I don't care enough about them unless they are within a very close knit friend group of mine. I don't really actually care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the in-group philosophy. A lot of countries, a lot of people have adopted that over the years, and actually, that's one of the things that evolution can explain is our tendency to be empathetic sometimes to the out groups.
Let's try. Yeah, tribalism versus.
I'm not empathetic to the out groups. Not really.
I think it's
mostly I mostly just watch things happen, and if they happen to disagree or coincide with my political and social beliefs, then cool. If not, things are going to happen.
I think there's an interesting road to go down here. So if we're gonna take Adam's, let's principle of charity, and let's take Adam's point of view and see if we can follow it down a train and see where it goes. Because what he's saying is, let's see if we can take the idea of these morals and see if we can functionally put them into society or in the way we ought to or ought not to. I don't want to hit abortion because abortion is about priorities. So let's not hit that because everybody's going to have different priorities. But if we hit something that's already been dealt with. So what do you guys think?
throwing gays off roofs.
Perfect. Throwing gays off roofs.
Oh yeah, there you go. Cheshire thinks it's perfect to throw gays off roof. You heard her today.
Can I just make a clarification on my argument? Because focusing on one prohibition or one behavior does not actually...
I think it only takes one, to be honest with you.
I just want, no, I agree with you. It's not going to take one thing.
I don't disagree with you. I think it takes one thing. If you're going to be, again, this is what I have noticed, again, when it comes to discussions with Adam. You get so far removed from the topic, you never get to the actual debate and discussion that is supposed to be. We are like 3 standard deviations away from the actual topic any longer. But but here's the thing. All it takes is one example of Christian morality being bad to show that deity isn't a perfect model to be somebody that you base your morals on. That's all it takes is one. I think I don't see how anybody could disagree with that because you're talking about a perfect being that's supposed to have perfect morals.
Can I chime in real quick on the Christian morality?
Please.
Because I can't.
And then I got 2 more super chats to do.
But I want to show you. Here's a book, and it's called.
Here's a book.
How Christianity changed.
I'm gonna chime in on this, but hey, read this book instead.
But no, I want you to read this book, and it's by Alvin Schmidt. And actually, it really opened my eyes because he went back to the Roman Empire, and he went back to lots of extra biblical pieces of information, and he identified a lot of the changes in morality that occurred since the Roman Empire and what Christians had a hand in, and he went through the centuries and did that kind of stuff. And actually another person, Joel Edmund Anderson, also just wrote a book, very similar kind of stuff. And they identified lots of the things that Christianity changed in people with respect to hospitals, education, the Roman Colosseum, women's treatment. So there's all kinds of good things that have come out of Christianity.
Let me ask you something before we go on. Let me ask you this. Did those good things come out of God changing those rules or man realizing those rules were bad?
Exactly.
It came out of man realizing we have to aspire to be like Christ.
That's Sarah's argument.
Listen real quick. One thing that you guys keep saying.
I understand her argument better than most, I guess.
But wait, Steve, let me say something really quickly. One thing that you guys keep saying is that the Bible is our moral foundation. However, I want to note, and it's very important, Jesus Christ for Christians is our moral foundation. In the first couple of decades,
in the Bible?
We didn't even have the Bible in the New Testament.
What?
We don't have the New Testament. And we had thousands of people worshiping Christianity without any sort of...
But the Bible was the codification of those things.
Well, the Bible is the codification. However, what's really important is that Jesus is our moral foundation.
But here's the difference without a distinction. But SJ, this is the problem. That's a difference without a distinction. Jesus may be the moral center, but he wrote and codified it in a book that's supposed to be how we're supposed to. We don't have access to Jesus directly.
You know that, Steve.
We don't have access. We do not have access to Jesus directly to say, "Hey, dude, what do you want?" He had to write it down, or
Jesus didn't write it down.
He didn't even write it down.
Well, I mean, but he had people writing it down, supporting under his guidance or that of the Holy Ghost or whatever.
I have a question.
But hang on, no, it's a big point though. We have access to a book that supposedly was written for the Word, God's rules, Jesus's rules. That's our guidebook. If there are ethical issues in that book, that reflects on Jesus then.
As I noted, though, Jesus basically said he came to fulfill the law, which he did. He fulfilled Mosaic law, so that law is gone. So the references to slavery that you guys keep bringing up have already been abolished. And Christians
that doesn't change her argument, though.
Understand what's going on with slavery, and we abolished it.
I have a question.
No, slavery laws were never abolished anywhere in the New Testament.
If you look into the New Testament, you look at how Paul treated Onesimus. He treated him as an equal and a brother and someone he loved.
But there's no codification change.
Well, that tells us how to treat people. Jesus told us, he gave us 2 rules. Love our neighbors as ourselves.
So you can have slaves as long as
you can love your slaves.
No. Love your neighbors. Love your neighbors. The basic rule of loving your neighbors as yourself, and that's something that's in every single religion, and you guys know that because you guys have all admitted the fact that the golden rule is pervasive throughout the world, and studies have shown that too.
I agree with that. That's why they categorize it.
Which is irrelevant to religion.
Well, that says that we don't enslave our neighbors.
No, that doesn't say that.
It just means you treat your slaves well.
Right. That's what the whole thing is. Sarah's arguing by how you treat your slave. Again, going back to Sarah's argument that everybody, I think SJ's ignoring. Real quick, I got 2 super chats real quick.
SJ runs, I want to ask her before she leaves. She said she had to go.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Just before you leave, I just want clarification on something. Jesus was a carpenter, correct? Yes?
Correct.
Did he know how to write?
I'm certain he did. He was able to read.
So then why didn't he write any of this shit down?
Because perhaps it's because 90% of the people were illiterate at the time.
So why did the other people write it down?
So he didn't know that people in the future would see this shit and maybe want a first-hand account? Wasn't he God? Doesn't he know?
I mean, well, here's the thing.
Well, we have the New Testament there, Chesh. I mean,
which
wasn't written by Jesus.
But he had 33 years.
It wasn't written by Jesus. It was influenced by Jesus.
But for 30,
it could have been written
hang on,
by
for
Jesus.
32 plus years, there's really no accounting of his life. Who knows? He had to write something. He had to learn to read and write. So he had to have written something. You would imagine, right?
I'm sure he wrote. And
so where's his writings?
He probably, I mean, that wasn't his purpose. His purpose was to work through his apostles.
Can we please get the perfect chair designed from Jesus?
Wait.
Is that, if now, Chesh, are you saying that if we were able to archaeologically dig up a perfect chair that was designed by Jesus and had Jesus' signature on it, said Yeshua on the chair, you're going to say, okay, I believe Jesus is divine?
No, but I'm going to sit in that bad boy and enjoy it with a beer.
It's got to be a hanging chair.
Yeah, it's got to be a hanging chair, totally.
This is true. Chair. I mean, I'd be psyched if we found
exactly.
I think they call that a hammock.
Let Chris go.
Go, Chris.
It's a hammock like
that. So when Jesus said, "Love thy neighbor as thyself," what was he quoting from?
he was going back to the original 10 commandments and he was summing them up.
No, actually, that is a quote from Leviticus. And if you look at it fully in depth and you get the context of what Jesus was saying, it was love thy neighbor Israelite.
The Israelites.
No, because actually, if you read through Isaiah, Chris, if you go through Isaiah, you're going to notice a lot of focus.
Isaiah was not.
Well, that's your. He didn't say. He didn't say love your neighbor as yourself, and I'm quoting.
Actually, Leviticus 19:9 actually does say something.
He didn't say that, but if you actually read Isaiah, you can look between the verses of 53, 52, and 54, and you're going to notice the entire idea of going to people who are non-Israelite.
SJ, that's what it says.
And the Gentiles, and they predict
biblical
Gentiles would be the ones to accept.
You've never read the Bible. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I knew that in the Levitical thing. I don't know what version this is. This is a standard version, but it says, this is Leviticus 19:9. You shall not hate your brother within your heart, but you shall have reason frankly with your neighbor. Lest you incur sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. That's pretty close to what Jesus said.
Jesus also talked about the Good Samaritan. He talked about the Samaritan.
But it was already in the Old Testament. He didn't come up with anything new on that.
He quoted.
Well, is he supposed to come up with something new? Would we respect?
Well, you said he changed the law. I mean,
I didn't say
the moral code has changed.
No,
there's a difference.
SJ, think about this though. If he's quoting Leviticus and he's giving a new meaning to it, then he's changing Leviticus.
If there's a new meaning.
Number one, Chris, I didn't say he was quoting Leviticus, and I didn't say he was giving a new meaning.
Well,
to Leviticus.
I think you implied it though, because if you're saying that it is no longer moral to have slaves, and we should not have slaves because we love thy neighbor as thyself, you are changing things. You're now saying slavery is not a good thing. We should not have slaves. You are changing something.
And I'm saying that that's the new interpretation of the new covenant. Yes.
But that's through. But I have to go with Sarah on this one.
Chair vibrate.
Hang on. It's because of secular things those changes came about.
Yes.
I have to side with Sarah on that particular issue. It wasn't God that said, I think slavery is a bad thing, or Jesus saying, hey, the Old Testament allowed for it. We're going to change that now. He didn't say anything like that. There's nothing explicit about it.
I got a quick question, just for a little bit of clarification. Who takes priority, Jesus or God?
They're a trinity, so they're all one. So it's three.
Okay, so if they say something that's contradictory to the other one, which one takes priority? This is a hypothetical.
Well, a Christian would say the priority comes out of the New Testament. Because
that wasn't an option.
Jesus takes priority over God.
Well, Chesh, listen for a sec. Jesus fulfilled the Old Testament laws, and some things did change. For example, we weren't supposed to eat shellfish if we went back to the Old Testament. However, in Acts 10, it points out that suddenly this blanket came down and God said, everything is clean. And so we're allowed to suddenly to eat shellfish, to do things like that.
Well, why doesn't matter?
Actually, I asked my Jewish friends about why that is. Why did God say that people couldn't eat certain foods? And my Jewish friends told me it was because, and this is what they honestly believe. They believe that God tries to separate the Jewish people from all of the other tribes. And you see that throughout the Old Testament, but he tried to separate them. And one of the ways to separate them is to say that they're not allowed to eat the same food. So they don't go in the same meals. They don't share meals together. They basically are separated through that. So that's what my Jewish friends.
I'm okay with that, that explanation.
It's actually more complicated than that though. Actually, the reason that they had dietary restrictions was because of animals that crossed over boundaries of their conceptions of other animals. That's why you weren't allowed to eat pigs.
Yeah, and I don't think that God. I mean, if God exists, I don't think he came up with those rules. It just seems ridiculous. I think
we're getting distracted.
We are.
So essentially, Jesus saying something overwrites whatever was written in the Old Testament. Therefore, Jesus takes priority over God in a biblical sense.
I'm not saying it quite like that, so I'm not agreeing to that point.
Well,
no.
I'm trying to clarify. I'm just trying to get a direct answer. You said your answer wasn't that the New Testament takes priority over the Old Testament.
Okay, the New Testament, New Covenant takes priority over the Mosaic Law, yes.
Okay, so God said the Mosaic Law, and Jesus said...
Well, one could just argue God allowed Jesus to make those decisions to change it.
Well, yeah, no, that's fine, but there's nothing in the New Testament that says that.
There's a lot of things that says that. The whole thing about the whole law's change, being modified, where slavery is no longer moral. That's not in the Bible either. I think people are reading into that because I don't read love thy neighbor as, oh, slavery is now immoral. I think that, again, I'm going to go side with Sarah on this. That came about because of secular reasoning.
I mean, it's at best unclear.
Well, vagueness in the Bible, go figure. 2 super chats real quick. Stuart Braun.
I just want to say thank you so much, you guys. I've got to run, but I want to say thank you so much.
Oh, yeah.
This was fun. Thanks, SJ.
Thank you, SJ. We do appreciate it. Stuart Baum, 20 Australian. I left the Anglican Church because of my morals. What I saw happen with the priest at the church I went to, it made me question everything that was in the Bible, and I think a lot of people have that experience as well. Again, I left church for the same reasoning, because I had morals, and back then I didn't even understand my moral framework. Right, this was way before I even started looking into philosophy, but I had enough decent morals instilled with me because I had really good parents. And I got asked that question today on SJ's channel, where do you get your morality from? And, I know other people have answered it very similarly and people have mocked it, but parents, I think, is a good place to get your morality from, at least initially, right? You don't understand philosophy. You don't understand virtue ethics. You don't understand.
As somebody who came from shitty parents, I disagree.
Well, yeah, because, you're now an immoral person because of that, though, right? So if you kind of prove my point.
But I understand morals.
You understand it, but you're still a shitty human being. Okay. Genius Tracks, $10. Adam fell for Peterson's snake oil that we need religion to understand the simplistic archetypes. It's dopey, and Walt Disney codified it in a way more eloquently than the Bible. I'm not a big JP fan, but I mean, to me, he's just a gobbledygook.
He's creepy.
And I think and the only thing that I really have to go by that I do understand, when he was at that discussion with Matt Dillahunty and Ozzy, of all people, I got to ask him the question, what to you as an atheist? And he started going into, like Crime and Punishment and Dostoevsky. And it just, to me, was this really bizarre narrative that had absolutely nothing to do with the question.
Ask JP a question that has to do with like defining a religious belief or anti-religious belief or whatever, he always goes off on a tangent and never answers anything straight.
I'm interested in JP because I'm interested in objective morality. So that's why.
Harris is an objective morality person. Carrier accepts objective morality. There are other people that accept. Sarah, I think, Sarah, do you accept objective morality?
As long as we agree upon the goals,
yes.
We can be objective, yes.
Yeah, of course. And I agree very strong with that. That's a grounding problem, right? If you have a grounding issue and you ground it in something we both agree upon, then both of us can look at something and say this is objectively the case. Like if we just say, hey, we're going to decide to play chess, we can look at objectively at the rules because we have access to that. Subjective means that I don't have access to her emotions. For example, if she has a toothache, that is subjective because I don't have access to that pain.
I might actually.
Some people get a little bit. I'm not saying that's the case with anyone here, but just for a clarification, when it comes to science, it's the same thing. Science agrees upon an epistemology, and that's how it's objective. Science goes through the same process. People assume.
So, are you saying what Adam was saying, and saying that you could actually take morality and run it through a process that might not be the scientific process, but a process that
I just want to say I'm falling in love.
That would be scientific or at least objective.
Remember, she's a sociopath, man. She'll cut you in the middle of the night and not think twice about it.
When someone actually understands my argument and it states it so clearly, it's like my heart flitters.
I'm the group secretary.
So you're getting at the point that I'm making. Like we're sitting here arguing with SJ over the list of rules. Now you understand how evolution works. You said you're an evolutionist. Like random mutation happens, and that mutation is either beneficial or detrimental to the organism.
Or
neutral. Yes, exactly. So these evolving moral systems have this adaptation, and we can argue over how it comes into being. From my perception of your arguments, it seems rather random because it seems like the person who has the most strong personality or is the most persuasive tends to convince people that no, this is what God believes, or no, this is the way we should do it because of reason.
Yeah, what you're looking for is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what you're looking for is a more broad understanding of the foundation rather than, slavery, therefore.
Well, no, I'm saying, so these sets of rules, if we're agreeing that morality is a set of rules, these rules are in competition with one another, just like organisms are in competition with one another. And the ones that survive are the ones that are the better
This is the
rule
genes
sets.
versus
I don't know if
memes
that's
argument.
true, because the thing is, you could have a bad rule set survive for a really long time.
But he's arguing Dawkins memes. What he's arguing.
Well, funny, Dawkins actually doesn't accept this.
No, but he writes about it in The Selfish Gene.
Yes, but memetics, I'm arguing more of a cultural evolution. Well, I guess, no, you could call it Dawkins, but
yeah, this is straight up Dawkins memetics.
My problem is just because something outlives something else has no indication on whether or not it's actually better or not. That's my problem with describing anything evolutionary in terms of better.
I have that same problem, because when looking at a random mutation, it has to do with the fitness of the organism with respect to the environment, right? So a mutation, when we say a random mutation, it's something that it could be beneficial, or it could be harmful, depending on where the organism is at because of selective pressures, right? So
environment could change. Exactly.
Environment could change, and a bad deleterious mutation can now be beneficial, or vice versa. Or it could be neutral. It can change.
This is the argument that people make.
When we talk about evolution is just a change of allele frequencies in a population over a given time in successive generations due to environmental attrition.
He's using a more broad term. He's using the term of something that could change over time.
If we look at it but when we look at that, and if we're trying to use a term akin to that, the problem is that if we just even look at it from a broader sense in say morality, any change is going to be this random mutation, whether or not it's beneficial or not. Someone having Klinefelter syndrome is a change in allele frequency, or a population having that as a change in allele frequency. That is a random mutation that's happened. Same thing is going to happen in morality. Someone decides, okay, well, I don't like gays. Gays are bad. Let's throw gays off of a balcony. And then that gets worked into our population of moral evolution somehow. Is that beneficial, or it still actually contributes to the evolution of our morality, and it could last there forever. It has nothing, but it is. If we're going to go by the health and well-being of people in general, it's definitely not beneficial in any way, shape, or form.
So Cheshire gets my argument that morality is like a computer program. Like, we can conceptualize a genome as a set of rules for constructing an organism and monitoring that organism over a lifespan. Correct? I mean, that's what the genome is.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So the set of rules for morality binds individuals into a cooperative community to achieve goals, fight for resources with other groups, all kinds of things. That's the evolution of morality.
Yeah, I think the main contention here is there's a good amount of philosophy behind this, and you're what's the word I'm looking for? You're taking a different direction and saying, well, maybe we can break this down on a numbers basis and say, like, okay, well, if it's good for this many people, then we should sacrifice the one. Not saying that is the case, but that is like the kind of idea that you're going for, that we could break it down and say that, like, if we treat it this way, then we can mathematically, or at least scientifically, register what is going to be the better option.
That's right. That's totally correct. But my question is, like, what is the metric that you're going to compare these on? It seems like one of the most important things that I intuitively think is moral is not being subjugated. Like,
I would put this argument as in you automatically lose just based on that God is a double-edged sword.
God is not a part of my argument, though.
Right, but the argument of Christianity morals versus secular morals.
But
not your exact current argument.
Let's separate this out into the list of rules. Okay, we never got past the list of rules. I totally agree with you. Like, where we broke down was trying to identify what the list of rules is. But
I thought we didn't care about what the rules were.
Well, for the sake of argument, we don't. I'm just saying, you brought it back to our debate. I'm talking about the list of rules. Like, if I'm asking, how are we going to measure one morality against another? The debate was about Christian morality versus secular morality. I'm asking for ideas on how we measure one against another. one idea I have
think that we methodologically can. I think that's methodologically errant, and any anthropologist would probably say that that's just an errant way to go about trying to understand morality in general.
I think for the most egregious ones,
cultures that don't have contact with each other and have completely different environments and completely different outgrowths.
But where we currently live is a world where connecting between groups of people is not a problem.
Yeah.
Well,
so if we're talking about there are small patches, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what I think Adam might be idealizing a little bit, which is necessarily a problem, but it is a problem for the conversation because we're talking philosophy a little bit versus science. So we're taking two different paths, and if we can get on the same road, that would be a good start. But I think Adam's idea works for the more egregious stuff, but doesn't work for the more subtle things. So it works for slavery. Slavery is like bad for a lot of people. So you could take that particular rule and say that, you know what, based on experience, based on measurable pain and measurable suffering, we can be like, yeah, no, mathematically this doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense economically. It doesn't make sense for innovation and for growing as people. We can get rid of that.
I'm debating a slavery question a week. If slavery is immoral, can evolution explain why is the debate?
Sure. And I think from your position, yeah, you could argue out slavery without having much of an issue. But I would say that based on your argument about specifically whether or not you can mathematically, like the reason why you wouldn't want to necessarily put abortion under that heading is because abortion is about priorities.
You're still going to this, like, ignore the specific rule set.
Bitch, you told me to talk about the fucking particular fucking rules.
No, ignore the rule set just for a second until I can make this argument. Like, how are you going to compare the rule sets against one another?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that this rule set.
I'm saying the rule sets produce a community of people that is either flourishing or not flourishing. Correct?
Yeah, but not in every case, because you could have abortion one way and have abortion the other way and still have a flourishing society. You can have people. You can have people being burned at the stake.
You might think that that's a neutral aspect. That might be like a neutral gene.
Oh, so you mean someone, not me? Yeah. Someone could think that, yes.
Yeah,
let me ask you a question because
we're obsessed with it.
We're quickly coming up to 2 hours. We're actually past over 2 hours. So hang on. Let me ask. We're gonna have to wrap this up a little bit, and I think Sarah needs to chime back in here because I still don't understand your guys' debate at this point because you got nowhere on it. Sorry, just nowhere. But hang on, Adam. Would you rather base your morality on secular humanism or whatever Christian morality that you're dreaming of in modernity? What are you more likely to base your morality on, if I can ask?
I've looked into secular humanism and there's no clear moral ethic.
That's not my question. My question is, if you have the choice between the two, which one do you tend to?
Christianity.
Okay. And okay, so do you have a particular sect of Christianity that you would abide more by? Because
I'm not a Christian, so I'm not.
I understand
really...
that, but you could be you could be a Christian atheist.
Yeah, I don't. No, not really.
I think what he's saying is that if you could choose to follow the morals that Christians use as an atheist, would you choose to use the secular one?
No, I don't have
a
nondescript Christianity.
Okay.
I think Christianity gets the psychology right. I think secular humanism gets the psychology wrong. So.
Okay. All right. Well, that's.
Okay, I have one question. So before you said that one of your ideals would be not to be subjugated.
Yeah, I never finished my point. You want me to finish it?
Well, I want to ask this, and then whatever comes of it, come of it. So my question is, how do we determine if slavery is going to be wrong? Because slavery was actually the backbone of many flourishing societies, but then also the backbone of many suffering societies.
Which one out over time?
So we're going with might makes right?
No, slavery's pretty much, slavery's on the way out. I think we would agree.
No, it's really not. Okay, so so slavery just isn't, like, it's particularly if you're talking in America, there's a big difference between the slaves from like Abraham Lincoln's time, versus the current sex trafficking, which is, by all intensive purposes, and by all intents and purposes, and by all definitions, is sex slavery.
Yes.
I agree. It's awful. Like,
so slavery is not on its way out. It's just under the rug.
So, but we can agree that it's illegal.
In some places,
there
yes.
was a point in time when it wasn't illegal, and now it's illegal.
Well, that depends on where you go and what time you're in.
Okay, so I think
there have been places throughout all of history and time where slavery was illegal.
Okay, and those moralities won out over the moralities.
No, that's the thing. They haven't, because all they've done is shift
none of those societies
their locations.
Surviving.
Yeah.
Only ours did. So,
and even then, you could argue that.
So I didn't realize slavery was like the new thing, the hot new thing that everybody's going back to. I guess.
I don't know. Have you seen the American president who was trafficking young girls on jet planes?
Yeah,
so maybe it is the hot new thing.
Yeah. Okay, so
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, slavery still is. I mean, sex trafficking is a form of slavery in some. It's
we also
talk about
slavery. Like mail order brides.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. Yeah.
Where you know.
Why? Because this whole price. It's out of your price range, Adam.
Transatlantic slave trade. Now it's huge.
Yeah, no, slavery hasn't gone any. Like,
it's
slavery
just been
hasn't really left.
It's bigger than ever.
It's just moved.
Well, I mean, she makes a valid point. I mean, the sex trafficking industry is a form of slavery.
I totally agree. Okay. Yeah, it is, and it's
in which case your argument that one won out is just bunk. It didn't win out.
One thing about the Atlantic
slavery just moved.
Hang on, go ahead, Sarah.
One thing about the Atlantic slave trade that I wanted to talk about earlier, and going into another direction, is that it was justified by Christianity.
Oh yeah, totally. Let's throw that in there.
Well, I mean, again, I don't know why you laugh at that. That's a valid point.
And Adam, wait, one more thing.
I totally agree.
Abolitionists did not actually give a rip about slaves. The whole first year of the Civil War,
it was all about economics.
Done to help slaves. And actually, after the Civil War, there was no laws passed to make northern slaveholding states, there were 2 of them, give up their slaves. The only slaves that were freed were the slaves of the Confederacy.
Yeah, wasn't it Andrew Jackson that didn't want to ratify it, and that he was getting pushback from that? I mean, the whole abolitionist movement was not really predicated on ethical considerations. I mean, now, there are certain people that were ethical, but the whole movement was not, we need to stop slavery because of ethical concerns.
Yeah, that's just a modern myth.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, anyways, we got to wrap this up. It's over 2 hours. This was interesting. Again, to say the
least. Only 2 hours, Steve? I go like 6 hours.
No, I haven't done that in a very long time. You haven't been around, Adam. I keep them down to around 2 hours now. But
good for you.
I got to tell you, I'm going to have to watch you guys debate, but I have a feeling it never got anywhere because this never got anywhere.
Watch it.
There was a good, I was counting. There was like a good 4 circles before I had the dip. So I was like, this conversation is like looping, and I really like your moderator, but he needs some practice.
Yeah,
I try to keep people on topic, but it's so difficult on topics like this because
as soon as I'm here, get out of here.
Yeah, I don't even bother with you. Yeah, when you're, you think I'm going to try to rein you in? I ain't stupid. You're sociopathic. I don't going to rein you in. But anyways, this was fun, guys. Thanks, Adam, for coming in and taking the barbs and the arrows. And like I said, I like your channel. I like you, dude. I don't understand you, but that doesn't mean I don't like you. And by the way, I still think you have one of the better, funnier videos out there. That whole
Social Justice Detective?
Social Justice. I think that's a very underrated video. I don't know how you
seen that. I'm gonna have to.
It's brilliant. The production value is. How did you not make? How did not make it bigger? I don't get that.
I think because I reference Richard Spencer in it, and it's like it's got trans.
I thought you did really well in that. I gotta admit, I liked it.
What's it called? Social Justice
Detective.
Yeah, go check it out. I mean,
I'm gonna link it in the chat.
I'll have to watch it. I'm an active feminist, so.
Yes, I play a feminist Dirty Harry. So.
And it's good. He does a good job.
Yeah, he was good. The theme was really interesting. Yeah, it was well put together.
But thanks. Sorry it got spicy, guys. I'm glad. I'm glad.
No, listen. If you're gonna be spicy with anybody, being spicy with me is the best option. Don't be spicy with Sarah. Sarah's adorable.
Yeah, don't ever get anybody who gets spicy or mean to Sarah going to have to deal with the rest of us.
Sarah and I got like we
actually
met.
no. She can fend for herself. I didn't get a white knight over.
Because
She'll kick your ass. I'm telling you, she's a British actress that feigns this Australian bullshit because of NASA show reasons. So.
Sarah got spicy in my chat, and we were going back and forth like we were just throwing punches. It was awesome.
She could, yeah. Don't underestimate her. She could definitely.
That's how this whole thing started.
That's how you Brits are. Oh, I mean Australian.
I can take a punch. Yeah. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, we're used to that.
And Adam's not wrong. Adam's not wrong. I didn't come in throwing insults, but I did come in swinging.
Yeah, you were giving some sass, girl. You were totally giving some sass.
Yeah, and so did Chris.
Respect.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching this. We got some stuff planned coming up, hopefully. There's also other things in the works. Go check out my community tab if you want to know what's going on, or my Patreon. I have posted there, too. By the way, I got a lot of new Patreons from the last couple of days. I appreciate that very much. So I do anybody that supports this channel, I mean, I don't know what I would do without you guys. I'm ecstatic that it's actually building something. So with that, guys, we will see you later, and I'm going to go away. Sarah, you want promote anything before we go? Last minute stuff? I have the end screen going up. Promote your stuff. Here we go. Go.
Yeah, go to my channel, Sarah Michel.
Hey, there you go. Short and sweet. Go to the Australians channel. There you go.